Lena never expected that offering to babysit for free would change her life forever. But when she saw the little girl sitting alone on the park bench, her tiny legs swinging as she clutched a worn-out teddy bear, Lena's heart ached. "Are you waiting for someone, sweetheart?" Lena asked gently, crouching to the child's level. The little girl, no older than 5, nodded. "My nanny was supposed to pick me up, but she's late." Lena glanced around. The park was nearly empty, the sun beginning to set. She couldn't just leave the child alone. "What's your name?" "Sophie." "Okay, Sophie. How about we wait together?" Sophie's face lit up, and for the next 30 minutes, Lena kept her entertained playing games, telling stories, and making her laugh. But as time passed, worry crept into Lena's chest. Where was this nanny? Just as she was about to call someone for help, a deep, commanding voice cut through the air. "Sophie!" Lena turned and her breath caught. A tall, devastatingly handsome man strode toward them, his sharp blue eyes scanning the scene with an intensity that made her pulse stutter. He had an air of power, the kind of presence that made people step aside without him asking. His tailored suit fit him perfectly, exuding wealth and authority. "Daddy!" Sophie squealed, running into his arms. The man lifted her effortlessly, pressing a kiss to her forehead before turning his attention to Lena. His gaze was sharp, assessing. "Who are you?" Lena straightened, taken aback by his abrupt tone. "I found Sophie here alone. She said she was waiting for her nanny, but no one came. I didn't want to leave her by herself." His expression softened for a fraction of a second before his jaw tightened again. "Thank you for looking after her." Lena swallowed, feeling an odd sense of familiarity in his face. Then it hit her: Xavier Blackwood, the billionaire CEO of Blackwood Enterprises. She had seen his face on magazine covers, headlines calling him ruthless, brilliant, and impossible to impress. And she had just babysat his daughter. "It was no problem," she said, trying to ignore the way his gaze lingered on her. Sophie tugged at his sleeve. "Daddy, Lena is really nice. She told me a story about a princess who saved herself." Xavier's lips twitched. "Did she?" Sophie nodded enthusiastically. "And she stayed with me the whole time. Can she come babysit me again?" Lena blinked. "Oh, Xavier studied her for a moment before speaking. "Are you a nanny?" "No," she said quickly. "I'm a kindergarten teacher." His expression shifted slightly. "So you're good with kids?" Lena hesitated. "I like to think so." Sophie clapped her hands. "Daddy, please! Can Lena be my babysitter?" Xavier exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "Sophie, we don't even know if Lena wants the job." Lena opened her mouth to protest she wasn't looking for a babysitting gig, but then she saw the hopeful look in Sophie's eyes. And something in her heart tugged. "I wouldn't mind helping out when I can," she found herself saying. "For free, of course. I just want to make sure Sophie's safe." Xavier's brows lifted slightly, as if he wasn't used to people offering things without expecting something in return. "You'd do it for free?" Lena nodded. "I don't mind." His piercing gaze locked onto hers, and for a moment she felt like he was seeing straight through her. Then, unexpectedly, a small, approving smile touched his lips. "All right, Miss Lena. Let's see how this goes." Lena never imagined that a single evening at the park would entangle her with one of the most powerful men in the city. Yet there she was, standing in front of Xavier Blackwood's penthouse, holding Sophie's tiny hand as the little girl led her inside with uncontainable excitement. The sheer luxury of the space momentarily stole Lena's breath. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased a breathtaking skyline, while sleek, modern furniture filled the vast open space. The place was pristine, almost too perfect, like it had been professionally designed rather than lived in. Yet, despite its undeniable beauty, there was a distinct absence of warmth. Sophie, however, seemed immune to the grandeur, skipping happily toward the living room and grabbing a stuffed bunny from the couch. "Lena, do you want to see my room?" Lena smiled. "I'd love to." Before Sophie could pull her down the hall, Xavier entered from the kitchen, his presence commanding even in the casual attire of a crisp button-down with the sleeves rolled up. "Sophie, give Lena a moment to settle." His voice was firm but not unkind. Sophie pouted but nodded, hugging her bunny. Xavier turned his attention to Lena, his gaze assessing, as if still trying to decipher why a woman with no ulterior motives would offer to help them. "Would you like something to drink?" Lena shook her head. "I'm fine, thank you." He nodded before motioning toward the sleek leather couch. "Sit." It wasn't a request, but Lena didn't bristle at his tone. She understood that men like Xavier were used to being in control. She took a seat, observing him as he leaned against the armrest of a chair across from her. "I'll be honest, Lena. I don't usually allow strangers around my daughter." Lena laced her fingers together. "I understand. You don't know me." His sharp gaze didn't waver. "Exactly. But Sophie likes you, and she's a good judge of character." Lena's lips curved slightly. "She's a wonderful little girl." His expression softened for the briefest moment before he straightened, his businesslike demeanor returning. "I want to know why you're doing this." "You're a teacher, not a nanny. You have no reason to offer your time for free." Lena exhaled, choosing her words carefully. "Because I saw a little girl alone in a park, waiting for someone who never showed up. And when I sat with her, I realized how bright and sweet she was. I didn't think twice about staying because no child should feel abandoned." Something flickered in Xavier's eyes, something unreadable yet undeniably intense. Lena continued, her voice steady. "I don't want anything from you, Mr. Blackwood. I just want Sophie to feel safe and happy. That's all." A heavy silence stretched between them, filled only by the distant hum of the city beyond the glass windows. Finally, Xavier exhaled, as if conceding something to himself. "All right." Before Lena could respond, Sophie reappeared, tugging at her sleeve. "Can I show you my room now?" Lena rose with a smile. "Lead the way." As she followed Sophie down the hall, she could feel Xavier's gaze on her back, still measuring, still unsure. But something told her that tonight had shifted something between them. And whether she was ready or not, she was now a part of their world. Lena had only intended to help out once or twice, but days turned into weeks, and before she knew it, she had become a fixture in Sophie's life. The little girl's enthusiasm whenever Lena arrived made it impossible for her to step away, and despite her initial reservations about getting involved with Xavier Blackwood's world, she found herself returning to their penthouse again and again. One evening, after Sophie had fallen asleep, Lena gathered her things, preparing to leave. As she reached for her coat, Xavier appeared in the hallway, his presence as commanding as ever. "Stay for a drink." His tone was lighter than usual, an invitation rather than an order. Lena hesitated. Their dynamic had always been centered around Sophie, and though she had grown accustomed to Xavier's piercing stares and quiet observations, they had never spent time alone. "I shouldn't," she replied. "It's late." He leaned against the doorway, watching her. "One drink won't change that." Something in his expression made it difficult to refuse. Against her better judgment, she nodded. They settled in the living room, the city lights casting a soft glow through the expansive windows. Xavier poured them each a glass of wine, handing one to Lena before taking a seat across from her. For a moment neither spoke. The silence wasn't uncomfortable, but it carried a weight neither of them wanted to acknowledge. "You're different from the people I usually deal with," Xavier finally said, swirling the deep red liquid in his glass. Lena arched a brow. "Is that a compliment?" A faint trace of amusement flickered in his eyes. "It's an observation." She took a sip of her wine, the smooth richness settling on her tongue. "And what exactly makes me so different?" "You don't ask for anything." He studied her, as if trying to piece together a puzzle that didn't quite fit. "Most people who come into my life want something: money, influence, and advantage." Lena exhaled, setting her glass down. "I told you from the beginning, I'm not here for that." "I know," he admitted. "And that's what confuses me." She tilted her head slightly. Maybe not everything has to be a transaction, Xavier. His gaze darkened slightly, something unreadable flickering behind his eyes. In my world, everything is. Lena leaned forward, resting her elbows on her knees. Then maybe it's time you saw the world differently. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The air between them had shifted, the carefully maintained distance cracking just enough to reveal something deeper beneath the surface. Xavier exhaled, setting his glass down beside hers. You're good for Sophie. Lena smiled softly. She's good for me too. His jaw tightened slightly, as if he wanted to say something else but wasn't sure how. Instead, he simply nodded. As she stood to leave, he walked her to the door, his presence lingering closer than usual. I'll see you tomorrow? It wasn't a question, not really. Lena nodded, her heart beating a little faster than it should. Yeah. See you tomorrow? As she stepped into the elevator, she couldn't shake the feeling that something between them had changed. And she wasn't sure she was ready for what came next. Lena hadn't expected her life to change so drastically, but here she was spending more time in Xavier Blackwood's world than in her own. What had started as a simple offer to help Sophie had turned into something much more complicated, something unspoken yet undeniable between her and Xavier. That night she arrived at the penthouse to find it unusually quiet. Sophie, normally eager to greet her, was nowhere in sight. Xavier was standing near the window, his silhouette outlined against the city's glow, a tension in his posture she hadn't seen before. She's asleep already? Lena asked, setting her bag down. Xavier turned, his expression unreadable. She wasn't feeling well, so I put her to bed early. Concern flickered in Lena's chest. Is she okay? She'll be fine, he assured her. Just a bit of a fever. I've already had the doctor check on her. Lena exhaled in relief, yet the charged air between them had nothing to do with Sophie. Something else was lingering between them, something Xavier wasn't saying. She stepped closer. Is something wrong? His gaze locked onto hers, intensity radiating from him. I've been thinking. Lena's heart gave an uneven beat. About what? Xavier took a slow step forward, closing the space between them. About you. About Sophie. About this. His voice was lower now, edged with something raw. You walked into our lives when I least expected it. And now, I can't imagine you not being here. Lena's breath hitched. This wasn't like their usual conversations, laced with unspoken tension and restraint. Xavier was letting his guard down, and it shook something deep inside her. I didn't plan for any of this either, she admitted. But I care about Sophie. And... She hesitated, but there was no point in denying it now. And I care about you too. Xavier reached for her hand, his touch firm yet gentle. I've spent years keeping people at a distance. It was easier that way, less risk, less disappointment. But you... He exhaled, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. You make me want to risk it. Lena felt the weight of his words, the vulnerability in them. This man, who commanded boardrooms and built empires, was standing before her, offering something real. She stepped even closer, so close she could feel his warmth. Then stop fighting it, she whispered. Xavier's eyes darkened with something unmistakable before he closed the remaining distance, his lips capturing hers in a kiss that stole the breath from her lungs. It was slow, deliberate, filled with everything they hadn't said out loud. When they finally pulled apart, Xavier rested his forehead against hers. I don't do things halfway, Lena. She smiled softly. Neither do I. For the first time in a long time, Xavier Blackwood wasn't in control. And for the first time, he didn't mind at all. Lena hadn't expected the kiss to change everything so drastically. But from that moment on, something between her and Xavier shifted, an unspoken acknowledgement that the walls between them had finally crumbled. The next few days passed in a blur of stolen glances and quiet moments where words weren't needed. Xavier no longer kept his distance, and Lena found herself drawn deeper into his world in ways she never expected. One evening, after Sophie had fallen asleep, Xavier invited Lena onto the penthouse balcony. The city sprawled beneath them, lights twinkling like scattered diamonds against the night. A gentle breeze swept through, carrying with it the crisp scent of autumn. Xavier stood beside her, his presence solid and steady. "I wasn't sure I'd ever let someone in again," he admitted, his voice quieter than usual. "After Sophie's mother left, I stopped believing in the idea of something lasting." Lena turned to face him, surprised by his openness. "I don't need promises, Xavier. I just need honesty." He exhaled, his gaze searching hers. "I don't want to lose you." Her heart clenched at the raw sincerity in his voice. "Then don't." Xavier reached for her hand, his fingers threading through hers. "I don't do things halfway, Lena. If we do this, I want it to be real. Not something temporary, not something uncertain." Lena squeezed his hand. "I wouldn't be here if I wanted anything less." A flicker of relief crossed his features before he pulled her closer, wrapping an arm around her waist. The warmth of his touch sent a shiver down her spine, but it wasn't from the cold. They stood there for a long time, the city stretching endlessly before them. It felt like a turning point, one neither of them could walk away from now. As the days passed, Lena found herself seamlessly becoming part of their lives. Sophie adored her, and Xavier's presence in her life grew stronger with each passing moment. But with that closeness came the inevitable scrutiny of the world Xavier belonged to. It started with whispers in the corporate world, curious glances from his associates when Lena accompanied him and Sophie to a gala. Then came the tabloids, splashing her face across glossy covers with headlines like "Mysterious Woman Captures Blackwood's Heart" and "Billionaire CEO's New Obsession, Who Is She?" Lena hated the attention, but Xavier handled it effortlessly, brushing off the speculation as if it were nothing more than background noise. But then came the confrontation she hadn't expected. One afternoon, she was leaving her small apartment when a sleek black car pulled up to the curb. The woman who stepped out was stunning, tall, poised, and exuding an air of effortless sophistication. Lena didn't need an introduction to know who she was. Sophie's mother. The woman approached with measured steps, her icy gaze sweeping over Lena with quiet assessment. "You must be the woman who thinks she belongs in my daughter's life." Lena stiffened. "I'm the woman who's been there when you weren't." The woman's lips curled slightly, not in amusement, but in something colder. "I don't know what you think you have with Xavier, but I can assure you, it won't last. You're a distraction. Nothing more." Lena's pulse pounded, but she refused to let the woman see her falter. "You don't get to decide that." A sharp laugh. "Oh, sweetheart. You have no idea what you've stepped into." Before Lena could respond, the woman turned, slipping back into the car as smoothly as she had arrived. Lena stood there for a long moment, the weight of the encounter settling heavily on her chest. She had fought for so long to keep her world simple, to avoid entanglements that could break her. But now, she was in too deep. And for the first time, she wondered if love alone would be enough to fight against everything coming their way. Lena stood frozen on the sidewalk long after the car disappeared down the street. The woman's words echoed in her mind, each syllable carefully crafted to plant a seed of doubt. And for the first time, Lena questioned whether she truly belonged in Xavier and Sophie's world. She had stepped into their lives so effortlessly, but maybe that was the problem. Nothing in Xavier Blackwood's world was effortless. Everything came with stakes, consequences, and challenges far beyond what she had ever faced before. By the time she arrived at the penthouse that evening, she was still unsettled. Xavier noticed instantly. He was seated in the living room, reviewing documents, but the second she stepped inside, his focus shifted entirely to her. His eyes narrowed slightly as he took her in. Something happened. Lena hesitated. She could keep this to herself, pretend everything was fine, but Xavier wasn't someone who accepted half-truths. And if they were going to move forward, she couldn't let fear dictate her choices. She set her bag down and met his gaze. "I saw Sophie's mother today." The air in the room shifted, a quiet storm brewing in Xavier's expression. He stood, closing the distance between them with slow, deliberate steps. "What did she say?" Lena exhaled, forcing herself to keep her voice steady. "That I'm just a distraction. That whatever we have won't last." Xavier's jaw tightened, tension rolling off him in waves. His hands found her waist, grounding her in his touch. "She doesn't get to decide what lasts." Lena searched his face, looking for reassurance, for certainty. "But what if she's right? I don't belong in this world, Xavier. I'm not like the people you surround yourself with. I don't know how to navigate all of this." His grip on her tightened just slightly, his gaze unwavering. "You think I want someone who plays by those rules? I've spent my life surrounded by people who only care about power and reputation. You are the first person who has ever been here just because you care." Lena swallowed hard, her emotions threatening to spill over. "But what if I'm not enough?" Xavier cupped her face, his thumb brushing against her cheek. "You are more than enough, Lena. And if you think I'm going to let someone else's words shake what we have, then you don't know me as well as I thought." A tear slipped down her cheek, but it wasn't from sadness. It was from the overwhelming certainty in his voice, the way he made her feel like she wasn't just part of his life, she was necessary to it. She wrapped her arms around him, sinking into his embrace. "I don't want to walk away," she whispered. "Then don't," he murmured against her hair. The weight of doubt lifted, replaced by something stronger. She had spent so much time worrying about whether she fit into his world that she hadn't stopped to realize that Xavier had already made her a part of it. And he wasn't going to let her go. Weeks passed, and the world outside their bubble continued to speculate, but Lena and Xavier built something unshakable. Sophie flourished in their presence, her laughter filling the penthouse, her small hand constantly reaching for Lena's as if she had never questioned her place in their lives. The whispers about Lena faded as quickly as they had started, but Xavier made it clear that he didn't care about public opinion. He remained steadfast, his devotion to her unwavering. Then, one evening, he surprised her with a weekend away. Lena had assumed it would be another glimpse into his extravagant world, perhaps a private island or a 5-star resort. But when they arrived, she realized he had taken her somewhere much more meaningful. It was a small, secluded cabin nestled in the mountains, far from the city and its relentless demands. The air was crisp, the scent of pine in the air, and the only sound was the rustling of leaves and the gentle breeze. Lena turned to him, surprise in her eyes. "This isn't what I expected." Xavier smiled, his expression softer than she had ever seen it. "I wanted to take you somewhere that wasn't about my world or yours. Just somewhere that could be ours." Her heart swelled, and as he pulled her into his arms, she realized something. She had spent so much time worrying about whether she belonged in his world when all along, Xavier had been building a new one with her. And it was theirs. A year later, the whispers had long since died down. Xavier and Lena had proven that their love wasn't fleeting, it was unshakable. They stood together in a sun-drenched garden, surrounded by close friends and family. Sophie, dressed in a pale blue dress, held tightly onto Lena's bouquet, grinning up at her like she was the happiest little girl in the world. Xavier stood beside Lena, his hand intertwined with hers, his gaze filled with nothing but love and certainty. The minister spoke, but Lena barely heard the words. All she could focus on was the man beside her, the life they had built, and the future stretching endlessly before them. When Xavier finally leaned in, sealing their vows with a kiss, the world melted away. She had found her place. And it was right here, in his arms.